Hello. Thank you for joining us today and welcoming us into your home. Welcome to the People's Political Outlet. Today we have with us a special guest. Let me first start off by letting you know this television show is giving you a forum to speak about things that are not going so well in your neighborhood or in your world, and an opportunity to change them. Now today we have a special guest. Can you introduce yourself?
Certainly. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ron Daniels. I am a retired probation officer as well as a former member of the faculty at Cal State Northridge Pan-African Studies Department. And I'm here today to basically talk about the criminal justice system and a recent experience I've had and the experiences of Richard Fine, who was recently detained for contempt of court by Judge Yaffe of the Los Angeles Superior Court.
Can I stop you right there? What is contempt of court? What does that mean?
Well, contempt of court is when it could be a number of disobedient acts on the part of a attorney who goes before the judge. It could be from anywhere from negligence to an intentional violation of the ethics of the profession or the canons of the profession. In this case, Mr. Fine was in litigation before Judge Yaffe, and during the process of this litigation, he raised the issue of whether the judge could be objective and non-biased in connection with the issue, because the county was a party to the controversy, and the county also was providing Judge Yaffe and everybody on the Superior Court in Los Angeles County with benefits that were inappropriate insofar as the judges of the Los Angeles County are state employees, not county employees, and therefore when a case comes before a Superior Court judge, the reasoning is that the likelihood that the judge is going to favor the county is simply because they are getting benefits from the county, which is quite reasonable and logical. And he raised those issues, and as a result, he was placed in coercive confinement for over a year and a half in the county jail, and in many instances he had to operate with less than the full benefits of a person being detained, insofar as the law library was not fully accessible to him at times. At times he had to literally beg for a pencil to write his briefs, which fortunately he had the skill to do so, having been a former member of the Justice Department, a federal Justice Department.
All right, let me just stop you for a second, because there's a couple things I want to understand. So, are you basically saying because this individual stood up to speak out on what his beliefs were, that someone that's of a higher authority would be upset enough to then take this person and use his power to put this gentleman in another situation?
Well, essentially, I mean, it's not as simplistic as it might sound, but the bottom line is exactly the way you presented it. I mean, he objected to an illegal move on the part of the judiciary of receiving benefits from a someone who was that they were ruling on in a case. You know, it's just like you know, if you're supposed to be sitting as a neutral party, you know, how can you be a neutral party when somebody is greasing your palm.
So is that what the conflict would be?
The conflict was that, and that, excuse me, Mr. Fine raised those issues, and subsequently the court, and he's a very excellent attorney. In fact, he's a doctor as in terms of jurisprudence, as well as a prosecutor that has worked for the federal government, eminently qualified and respected in the field. And so he knew how to work the law to embarrass the judges, and that's exactly what he did. He embarrassed the court. And as a consequence, the court said, well, we don't want to deal with your kind, so ultimately they disbarred him after detaining him for almost a year and a half.
Wow.
And he took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and even there, the Supreme Court refused to consider his complaint.
So now he was actually functioning in the system, and because of his knowledge in that, it's almost like the system turned their back on him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in fact, he was disbarred and disbarment comes from a peer review, and the Supreme Court ultimately reviews disbarment, and the Supreme Court of California authorized the disbarment, which was, despite the fact that in several case holdings, because this went down another legal avenue, and several case holdings, the judge held that it was true that the judges in Los Angeles County were receiving unauthorized and illegal benefits, but because of a legislative move and sleight of hand, they were given immunity, for the offense, and they're still collecting on it. Where I come into play is because I'm one of the few people who was litigating an issue that went before YAFI during this period of time, who did receive a favorable writ from YAFI. The thing is that I received a favorable writ primarily, well, I can't say primarily because my case was clear, and I'll explain the details of my case aside.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear exactly what.
Well, basically, in my case, I said I'm a retired probation officer. I spent a great deal of my career making reforms within the system. As a consequence, I was involved in a very conservative setting and encountered a very hostile work environment for many years. As a result, I suffered from high blood pressure, and eventually I had to retire because of a congestive heart failure.
So, and that was brought on from the stress of the
job stress,
Wow.
And the county has a program called long-term disability, whereby if you go out on long-term disability and you meet certain standards set by the Office of Social Security, you can continue to receive service credit during that period where you are ill before you retire. And so I was compelled to retire at 65, but when I was ordered to retire 3 years before I turned 65, they did not want to give me, acknowledge the rule of law which said that I can receive service credit all the way up to the age of 65, even if they make me retire.
And this was your fight?
Yeah, this was my fight.
Okay.
LACERA, which is my retirement association, Los Angeles County Employees Association, they made a decision that they were only going to give me service credit up to the day I retired. When the law says that I can get service credit all the way up to the age of 65, as long as I am on long-term disability.
Right, okay.
And during that period, even after they made me retire, I was still on long-term disability because I was receiving 60% of my salary during that period of time. And so I went before the court and asked the court, Judge Yaffe to compel them to give me service credit up to the age of 65. And he ruled that the statute was clear on its face and that I deserved to get service credit up to the age of 65 as long as I remained eligible. Well, I attribute a lot of my success not only to a fair-minded judge in my case, just simply because he was fair in my case doesn't necessarily mean he was fair in the case of Richard Fine, though.
Right, okay.
And I think that his awareness was increased and his consciousness was increased as a result of Richard Fine bringing to the court's attention the fact that this was an illegal conflict of interest on the part of the judiciary in Los Angeles County, because this benefit purportedly to entice people to become judges, and was a fringe benefit, an additional benefit that basically was a payoff. It could be inferred as a payoff for favorable rulings. And the way it appeared that the rulings had been favorable toward the county, there was only the percentage of cases that went before the Los Angeles County Superior Court, whereby the county was a litigant. In almost 99% of those cases, the county came out ahead.
Right.
So Fine raised this issue, and when I litigated my case before before Yaffe, he ruled in my favor. But I also had a correlative claim against LACERA, which was the Retirement Association, for breach of fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty is where the Retirement Association has a duty to act to my benefit.
Yeah.
And they didn't, because it was plain as day that the statute was clear and that I should have been receiving, my benefit up to the age of 65 as a service credit. They denied me that and put me in a position of having to go to court to prove the obvious. And as a consequence, I had to spend, because I couldn't find a lawyer who would take my case, because the county engages in these wear-down tactics where they exhaust you financially, and no lawyer wants to take these kind of cases because the average person doesn't have the kind of money that it takes to fight it. Fortunately, because of my law school background, I was able to do the legal work and write the briefs, which was well written, to the degree that I was able to convince the judge of the obvious. Anyway, when the case was assigned for damages to another courtroom, Judge Menning's courtroom, immediately the LACERA, which is it's supposed to be independent of the county, but as the name of the organization suggests and signifies, the Los Angeles County Retirement Association is a part of the county. See?
Wow. Well, hold on. Let me stop you there. We're going to go to a commercial break. We're going to come right back and get on this. Yeah. This is pretty interesting.
If you didn't know, neighborhood councils were created to help improve your communities. We have funds available for projects that are important to you. We also have the ability to bring other resources provided by the city. So be part of the solution and become a member of your local neighborhood council.
Okay, welcome back. So Ron, just tell me what your feelings are about all of this. How does all of this work together, and what would be a better way for the system to work to benefit the people that are supposed to benefit?
Well, obviously, they need to eliminate any appearance of a benefit to judges when the county is a party to the litigation. And that would create an obvious perspective from the layperson's or the litigant's point of view of fairness. As it stands, nobody can believe that judges can be fair when they'll be receiving a benefit from the party who is in litigation against the citizen, you know. And the county has unlimited resources. So, and then they have the court judges in their pockets, because every Superior Court judge, and I don't know how long this has been going on, it's been going on for years though, have been receiving these benefits. And many of the appellate court judges, which I found to be the case, in my case, in the case of David Gonzalez's case, who is another party who experienced a similar situation.
Well, I was going to ask you, are there any other cases that are sort of like parallel with this particular case?
Yeah, there's numerous cases. There was a case of David Gonzalez, who found that the judge, he went up against Judge Jaffe. Jaffe ruled against him, and he was fighting, I think, the city and the county. He went to the appellate court, as I did, and he was, the appellate court affirmed the decision of Jaffe. In my case, the appellate court affirmed the decision of the lower court, where I was suing for damages. And all of the judges on my panel were former Superior Court judges who had received these benefits. The same holds true with David Gonzalez. Now, just the opposite happened in the case of Judge Roosevelt Dawn. Roosevelt Dawn was a very controversial judge when he was on the juvenile court in Los Angeles County. He eventually became mayor of Inglewood. And while he was mayor of Inglewood, an ordinance was passed that gave special consideration to people who lived in this, to entice them and induce them to live in the city of Inglewood by giving them a reduced mortgage rate. Okay? And at the time when the ordinance was passed, Dawn Dawn was not, he was living in Inglewood, and there was nothing that said that if you're making the law, if you're a party to the law, that you cannot benefit from it. However, when he tried to refinance a loan and get a reduced rate, they accused him of conflict of interest, and they actually prosecuted him. He ultimately was compelled to, and for good reason, to settle, the case, although it really was a situation where there was really no conflict of interest on his part when he initially made the decision, because, it was not anticipated. Well, strike that. It's very complex. I don't want to get the details and facts correct.
Okay, well, I just want to touch back on something else, because it really struck me when you were talking about the wear-down tactic. It seems like the giant has the resources, and so the little man, regardless how much money that individual has, is never going to match the whole county or the whole city's resources, and so they can run the game in the courtroom until you run out of money, and that's sort of like that's the way they conquer.
In most instances, that's one of the chief tactics that the county and the city uses it's like David and Goliath. The county and the city being Goliath, and the average lay person who litigates against goes up. When they say you can't fight City Hall,
right? Yeah,
that's where that come from, because City Hall got all these resources and things, and the average person doesn't have the financial wherewithal to take on this huge, deep-pocketed bureaucracy that spends money and gives contracts to their cronies and all of that to defeat your claim. So that's one of the key issues that has to be addressed, apart from the conflict of interest with the judges. But there are many things that are wrong with the criminal justice system and the civil justice system that need to be dealt with, because it hasn't had the kind of scrutiny that needs to be had in order to ensure people equal justice under the law. They talk about Lady Justice being blindfolded, but I saw it in my experience. She's a peeping Tom and drag, as far as I'm concerned. You know,
That's a word picture for you.
You know, because I spent a lot of money trying to get justice, and quite frankly, I was trying to help other people out because I had basically got won the first level of my litigation, but I wanted to make them pay additional amount of money so that the next person that came before them, that they didn't send them through those changes, because I was especially lucky from a number of standpoints. I had the case of Richard Fine that was prevalent at the time. I had a law school background, and I had litigated several other cases before then, and so I was able to write a number of briefs that would have cost an enormous amount of money had it, I not had those skills. The average person didn't have my skills, not to sound egotistical or not, but I had unique skills. I was a college professor. I taught English,
Right.
and things, and my background has been in literature and law.
Wow.
And as a probation officer, all of these things combined to at least give me partial justice,
Right.
combined with the fortuitous circumstances of Fine and him making a great big issue out of it, because his case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow. We're going to take another commercial break, and we're going to be back, but it kind of sounds to me like for the people that are looking for justice, the big boys are always going to step into their world and kind of like consolidate that, and the only people that you find is just us.
That's
We're
right.
going to be right back.
If you didn't know, neighborhood councils were created to help improve your communities. We have funds available for projects that are important to you. We also have the ability to bring other resources provided by the city. So be part of the solution and become a member of your local neighborhood council.
Oigo todo el tiempo, eres para mí. I can't explain this feeling. I think about it every
It's represents a real past known for generations as an heirloom. Strapped to the freedom, yes, I'll be there. Soon snakes lurk for lies as I work for God's words to write. Searching my soul as word shots of my heart cleansing and creating light.
Hi, my name is Isaac Luna from Luna's Radiators and Mufflers. We are located at 10677 San Fernando Road, the beautiful city of Pacoima, California. We've been in the same location for over 40 years. We specialize in radiators, mufflers, brakes, shocks, custom exhaust, catalytic converters. We are not cheap and we're not expensive, but we are reasonable. Our phone number is 818-899-0812, and we are glad to be of service to you. And thank you.
Wow. Welcome back. If you just joined us, it's definitely been a heated discussion, very passionate discussion. You are watching the People's Political Outlet. Right now, Ron, I'd just like to ask you, because we got to wrap up here, we're running out of time, but what steps could be made, what steps could be taken to reform our system to make things fair for the common citizen?
Well, I recall what Richard Fine said, vote the bums out. Well, that's one avenue that could be taken. However, not all judges are elected officials in Los Angeles County, so that's a problem there, but it is an alternative. Myself, I would suggest that we start engaging in what we did during the Civil Rights Movement, with such tactics as civil disobedience, passive resistance, and at some point in time we might have to stage some sit-ins in the courthouse in order to bring home to these judges that people are looking for justice, and when they go into the criminal justice system or the civil system, they expect a reasonable, they have reasonable expectations of justice. We always presented with the image of Lady Justice as symbolizing justice. But as far as I'm concerned, based upon my experiences, Lady Justice is peeping Tom and drag, because those judges who ruled on my case, who dismissed my case after a judge had rendered an interpretation of the law governing my case, were obviously swayed by something other than objectivity. And I was in a position that was better than most people because of my experiences as a probation officer, having had a law school background, having litigated 3 different cases, filing suits on my own. I was, was a much better position. But even in that instance, the county, LaSarah, wore me down financially because these attorneys, they want to be paid.
Right.
And I had to eventually hire a couple of attorneys to assist me in terms of the litigation, because it got to the point where I just didn't have the legal background experience to litigate a breach of fiduciary duty and a damages claim. You see what I'm saying? So getting back to your original question, we have to bring to the court's consciousness the fact that people are no longer going to tolerate piecemeal justice. Our jury system is flawed in many respects. I would even call for a professional jury system whereby people are trained to be trial jurors, because prejudice come into play in terms of that. Oftentimes people are compelled to plea bargain when they're not guilty. There's a case in the paper this morning where a young guy from Long Beach Poly was accused of rape, and he was consensual, they found out, and the lady who accused him of rape just recently come out and said it was consensual, but this guy spent 10 years in the penitentiary, 5 years in the penitentiary behind the fact that the lawyer told him that he'd be better off plea bargaining to get 5 years as opposed to facing 25 years.
Right.
So plea bargaining has been one of the techniques to use to incarcerate people unjustifiably.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a lot of things.
All right, but look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to send a camera team to follow you in your journey for justice, for reforming the system. And then we're going to come back in a couple of months, maybe 3 to 6 months, and have a follow-up show and let you, our audience, see what has been happening. And if anybody out there has interest in jumping on board to change the system to get justice, what we all deserve, information will be on right at the end of the show. Please contact us and join us in the quest for justice. Until next time, have a great one. Be blessed. Be safe.